How does a whole industry just appear? Well, sometimes the best way to get your head around a massive change in society is to look at a single company that was there right at the start. So today we're going to dig into the 40-year history of a company called Senior Lifestyle. And what's so wild is that their journey is the story of how America's whole idea of getting older has been completely turned on its head.
All right, I want you to hop in a time machine with me. The year is 1985. Picture your parents or your grandparents. They're still sharp, still active, but, maybe keeping up the big family house is becoming a bit too much. They don't need a hospital, that's for sure, but a little support would be nice. So where do they go? Here's the crazy part. That place didn't really exist. Your options were just incredibly limited. I mean, think about it. On one side, you had the family home. Totally independent, sure, but that could also mean being isolated and dealing with all the hassles of maintenance. And on the other side, the nursing home, which back then was often a very clinical, almost sterile environment. It was about medical care, not about comfort or living a full life. There was this huge, massive gap right in the middle, a need that just wasn't being met for millions of people.
And it's right inside that gap that our story really kicks off, because one real estate developer looked at the situation and didn't see a problem. He saw a massive opportunity. It was a huge gamble on a brand new idea. What if we treated senior living like hospitality? The guy with this big idea was Bill Kaplan. And here's the most important part of the story. His background was not in healthcare. He came from the world of food service and luxury condo development. He'd spent his career building high-end homes for wealthy people, so he knew exactly what they wanted. And when he saw the depressing options for seniors, he had this totally radical thought. Why can't we just apply the same principles of a luxury hotel to a place for seniors to live? So in 1986, Kaplan pushed all his chips in. His company, Senior Lifestyle, started building the Breakers at Edgewater Beach in Chicago. This was a $50 million bet on this wild new idea. We're talking restaurant-style dining, a 24-hour concierge. This was not a facility. It was a luxury apartment building. The concept was so out there, it actually took 3 whole years to fill up. But when it did, its success didn't just prove Kaplan right, it basically wrote the playbook for an entire industry. Okay, so after you've proven this luxury model can work, you'd think the company would just, copy and paste it everywhere, right? But nope. Instead, they made a move that was so unexpected and frankly so brilliant that it would become their secret weapon for decades. They decided to go after 2 totally opposite ends of the market at the exact same time. So the story goes that in the mid-90s, the mayor of Chicago at the time, Richard M. Daley, saw how successful the Breakers was and went to Kaplan with a challenge. See, the city had a huge problem. Not enough safe, dignified housing for its seniors on fixed incomes. So the mayor basically said, this is amazing for the rich, but can you do something like this for everybody else? Kaplan's answer was a brand new concept called Senior Suites. And the engine that made it all possible was this thing called the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, or LIHTC. Now, this stuff can get super complicated, but here's all you really need to know. It's a federal program that gives big tax breaks to private companies if they build affordable housing. It was the absolute key to making a public-private partnership work, letting Senior Lifestyle build great communities while keeping the rent affordable. So just look at this 2-pronged strategy. On one hand, you've got the Breakers. It's for wealthy seniors, it's privately funded, and it's got all those luxury hotel perks. Then you have Senior Suites for folks with limited incomes, funded by those tax credits, and providing really important services like daily check-ins. This is what you call a counter-cyclical business model. It's genius. When the economy was shaky and the luxury market took a hit, the government-backed affordable side provided rock-solid stability. It was an unbelievably smart move. All right, let's fast forward a bit. The company proved their model worked on both ends of the spectrum. Now it was time to get big. This next chapter wasn't about one founder's vision anymore. This was about professionalizing the whole operation, making it a well-oiled machine, and bringing in the serious money from Wall Street. And the man for that job was John DeLuca, who took over as CEO in 2011. If Bill Kaplan was the visionary developer, DeLuca was the finance wizard. He was an expert in mergers, acquisitions, all that complex money stuff. His whole mission was to take this successful company and transform it into an absolute powerhouse, ready for explosive growth. And get this, under his leadership, the company more than doubled in size in just 5 years.
So how on earth did they grow that fast? Well, one of their main financial tools was something called a sale-leaseback. It sounds tricky, but the concept is actually pretty simple. Senior Lifestyle would sell the actual buildings they owned to a huge investor, like a real estate investment trust. This instantly floods them with a ton of cash. Then they just sign a really long lease to keep running the place themselves. The key is they get all that capital for growth without ever losing control of their communities.
And we're not talking about chump change here. In 2012, they did a massive $600 million sale-leaseback deal with Healthcare REIT, which is now a giant called Welltower. That single deal was a huge stamp of approval from Wall Street. It was a signal to the whole world that Senior Lifestyle wasn't just a great builder, they were a world-class operator that the biggest names in finance trusted to run things right. So now the company is a major national player, but a new challenge was right around the corner. The customer was changing. The generation that fought in World War II was being replaced by the baby boomers, and this was a generation with totally different ideas about design, technology, and what being old even meant. Senior Lifestyle's answer to the boomers was the Sheridan Collection, which they launched in 2016. This was their new top-of-the-line luxury brand. Think really high-end finishes, big open floor plans, tons of natural light. These places had movie theaters, art studios, and tech built into everything. The whole point was to create a place that felt less like a home for seniors and more like a modern, upscale resort that you'd want to live in at any age. But this evolution wasn't just about looks. Something really profound was happening with demographics. People were living longer, and they were staying in their own homes for much longer. That meant when they finally did decide to move, often in their mid-80s, they were coming in with more complicated health issues, and specifically a much higher rate of Alzheimer's and dementia. To meet this incredibly important need, the company created its own award-winning memory care program called Embrace. And this was a total game changer. It moved away from the old model of just trying to manage difficult behaviors. Instead, it focused on reimagining possibilities with a real research-backed approach. For instance, one part of the program used aromatherapy and special sounds to help reduce anxiety. And it worked so well it won a major industry award. This was a huge step up from basic care to something truly sophisticated and holistic. A company does not survive for 40 years without getting punched in the face a few times. And in the last decade or so, Senior Lifestyle had to weather a storm of crises that would test the entire industry. This next part is all about resilience. I mean, just look at the gauntlet they had to run. They made it through the 2008 financial meltdown, then came the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, a once-in-a-century event that put senior living right at the terrifying epicenter of a global health crisis. And right after that, they, like a lot of companies in Illinois, had to navigate a big class action lawsuit over biometric privacy, which they eventually settled. Each one of those events would have been enough to sink a lesser company. And when they came out of all that, the world had changed again. Interest rates were through the roof, and construction costs were astronomical. Suddenly, building brand new communities, which had been their main way to grow for years, was just way too expensive. So, what did CEO John DeLuca do? He announced another big pivot. The new strategy, stop building and start buying. The idea is to scoop up newer communities from other developers who couldn't survive the downturn and get them at a discount. It's a classic smart move. So after 4 decades of twists, turns, and crises, where does Senior Lifestyle actually stand today? Well, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. In the 2024 J.D. Power Satisfaction Study, which is like the Oscars for this industry, Senior Lifestyle ranked number 2 in the entire country. And that shows that even with all the big money strategy and rapid growth, their fundamental promise of creating a great place to live is still what drives them. So here's the real takeaway. The story of this one company is really the story of how all of us think about aging. We went from a simple, stark choice between staying home or going to a nursing home to this whole spectrum of options that are all about hospitality, wellness, and choice. Their 40-year journey helps us understand how we got here, and it leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to think about. As the next generation starts to redefine what old age even means, what will the senior lifestyle of tomorrow look like?